The night was quiet, too quiet. When officers approached the lonely RV parked deep in the Alabama woods, they thought they were responding to a routine welfare check. But what they found inside would shatter every rule of normal investigation. Hidden behind boarded windows and reinforced doors was a nightmare, a secret that had been living among families for years.
A father, a neighbor?
A predator. His name was David Harper. To the world he was a quiet single dad, but inside that RV he kept the truth locked away. A truth so horrifying that even seasoned detectives struggled to breathe when they saw it. What began as one man's darkness would unravel into something much deeper. A web of lies, betrayal, and evil that reached into the very system sworn to protect the innocent. This is not just a story about crime. It's a story about obsession, about the monsters that hide behind masks of love.
And about the officers who dared to face them, no matter the cost. Brace yourself.
Because once you hear what they found inside that RV, you'll never forget it. It was a quiet morning in suburban Georgia when a 911 call came through dispatch. A panicked male voice shouted, "My baby's not breathing! Please help!" The man identified himself as David Harper, a 38-year-old father who claimed his infant son had suddenly gone unresponsive in their RV parked behind a local gas station. Paramedics raced to the scene, sirens cutting through the calm dawn. When they arrived, the RV sat at the edge of a wooded lot, old, dented, and covered in grime. David stood outside, shirtless and frantic, waving his arms. His face was red, his words jumbled, and his hands shook uncontrollably. The paramedics entered the RV and immediately noticed something was off. The air was stale, thick with a sour odor. Dirty blankets covered the seats and empty beer cans littered the floor. In the back corner, the baby lay on a small mattress, motionless. His skin was pale and cold. One of the medics began CPR while the other called for backup. David hovered behind them, muttering, "He just stopped breathing."
I don't know what happened, but something in his tone, emotionless, detached, unsettled the rescuers. When police officers arrived minutes later, they took over the scene.
Officer Reynolds, the first on site, scanned the RV. His flashlight caught glimpses of strange objects. A camera tripod near the bed, a padlocked storage trunk, and stacks of old videotapes labeled with dates. His instinct screamed that this wasn't a simple medical emergency. The infant was rushed to the hospital, but within half an hour, doctors pronounced him dead. The cause of death was unclear. There were no immediate signs of injury, but the ER physician noticed bruising on the baby's arms and an odd circular mark on his leg. Something wasn't right. Back at the RV, police began treating the vehicle as a potential crime scene. They asked David to stay nearby for questioning. He grew defensive, pacing and mumbling that it was just an accident. When an officer gently asked to search the RV further, David snapped, yelling, "You need a warrant!" before storming off toward a nearby diner. Detectives soon arrived and obtained that warrant. Inside the RV, they began a meticulous search. What they found beneath the clutter made their stomachs churn. Hidden cameras positioned in corners, a collection of children's clothing that didn't match the infant's size, and a computer with folders labeled under false names. As the day faded into night, the once ordinary parking lot transformed into a bustling crime scene. Police tape fluttered in the wind, and flashing red-blue lights illuminated the trees. Detective Sara Daniels, a seasoned investigator, stared at the RV and muttered under her breath,
"This isn't just neglect.
This is something much darker. What began as a tragic emergency call was about to unravel into one of the most disturbing cases the county had ever seen. The horrifying truth of a father's secret life inside his RV of horrors. The following morning, the sterile halls of the Georgia State Forensic Center were eerily quiet. The infant's small body lay on a white examination table, under the cold light of the autopsy room. Lead pathologist Dr. Amelia Cross began her work in silence. What she found changed the course of the investigation forever. There were faint bruises on the child's chest and tiny scratches on his back. The cause of death wasn't immediate, but internal bleeding near the brain suggested blunt force trauma. Dr. Cross paused, her expression hardening. "This was no accident," she whispered. By the time Detective Sara Daniels received the report, she was already piecing together her own suspicions. The RV scene had been crawling with inconsistencies. Why had David Harper refused to let them search the night before? Why were there cameras hidden in multiple corners of the vehicle? Back at the precinct, the tech team worked to extract data from the seized computer. After hours of waiting, the screen finally came alive. Dozens of hidden folders appeared, each encrypted but crudely labeled with dates. One folder stood out: Happy Family Trips. When the files were decrypted, the room fell silent. The videos weren't family trips. They were recordings, disturbing, illegal, and horrifying in nature. In many clips, David's voice could be heard instructing the camera, describing what he was doing. None of it could be played for long. Detectives had to look away. What they saw confirmed one thing beyond doubt. The man wasn't just a negligent father. He was a predator. Detective Daniels stepped out of the tech room, her face pale. "We need to find him now," she ordered. David Harper had left the diner the previous night before police could re-interview him. His phone was off and his car was missing. An APB was issued within the hour. Every available officer was alerted. The RV was now sealed and guarded as a primary crime scene. Inside, forensic experts uncovered even more: hidden compartments under the bed, old journals filled with fragmented thoughts, and dozens of photos of unidentified children. Meanwhile, Dr. Cross continued her work at the morgue. Toxicology revealed traces of sedatives in the infant system, the kind used to keep someone still for long periods. Combined with the physical injuries, the evidence pointed to prolonged abuse. She took a deep breath and recorded her conclusion. Cause of death: homicide. News of the case leaked to local media within hours. Headlines flashed: "Infant found dead in RV, father missing." Crowds gathered near the police station, demanding answers. Mothers cried openly, clutching their children tighter. Detective Daniels addressed the press briefly, her voice steady despite exhaustion. "This investigation is ongoing. We are pursuing all leads to locate David Harper. What we've discovered so far is deeply disturbing. Behind the scenes, the search intensified. Surveillance footage from nearby stores showed David walking quickly down a service road hours after the paramedics left. He carried a backpack and looked over his shoulder multiple times before disappearing into the woods. The FBI joined the case by evening, bringing specialized units to assist with tracking. Drones scanned the wooded area, and bloodhounds were deployed. Every passing hour felt heavier. They weren't just chasing a suspect. They were racing against the possibility that he'd hurt others. Detective Daniels stood by the RV that night, crime scene lights casting a blue hue over her face. She looked at the broken door and whispered, "What kind of father does this?" The hunt for David Harper had begun, and what they were about to uncover in the coming days would prove that the RV was only the surface of something far darker. The sun rose over Georgia, but for the investigators there was no sense of dawn, only dread. The manhunt for David Harper entered its second day. Police checkpoints appeared on highways, helicopters circled rural routes, and alerts were sent to neighboring states. Still, David remained missing. Detective Sara Daniels sat in the command post, staring at a map pinned with red markers. Each pin represented a possible sighting, all dead ends. The only clue came from a receipt found inside the RV, a rental payment for a storage unit 20 miles outside of town. By noon, she and her partner, Detective Kyle Brooks, arrived at the site, an isolated storage facility behind a truck stop. Half the units abandoned, the other half rented under fake names. Unit 47B was registered under Daniel Hargrove, but the address matched David Harper's old residence. The lock was new. Sara took a deep breath. "Let's open it." As the metal door screeched upward, a stale odor escaped. Inside it was pitch black. The detectives stepped in, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, a disassembled baby crib, a broken laptop, and, most chillingly, a small wooden chair bolted to the floor with restraints. Sara froze. The silence in the room felt alive.
"My God,"
she whispered. They began photographing everything. In one corner, a tarp covered a strange mound. Kyle pulled it back, revealing multiple duffel bags. Inside were children's toys, clothing, and missing person flyers from other states. On a rusted metal shelf sat an old camcorder and a box of labeled tapes, identical to those found in the RV. One tape, marked June 12th, was still inside the player. They played a few seconds. David's voice echoed in the darkness. "This is where they learn to behave." Sara shut the player off immediately. Her hand trembled. The tone in his voice wasn't of anger, it was pride. They called for backup. Within minutes, the area was swarming with investigators, forensic units, and FBI agents. What was once a quiet truck stop now resembled a battlefield of flashing lights and whispered horror. Outside, reporters had begun to gather. News of the RV predator had spread nationally. Parents watched from home, clutching their children as anchors warned that more victims might be involved. That evening, forensic techs made another discovery, a hidden floor compartment beneath the unit's concrete slab. Inside it were two sealed containers. The moment the lids were opened, everyone stepped back. The contents confirmed what everyone had feared. This wasn't just a place of abuse. It was a burial site. Detective Sara turned away, unable to look. The air grew heavy. Even the seasoned officers struggled to stay composed. A grim silence fell as they carefully collected evidence, documenting everything. Meanwhile, a sighting came in from a rural town 2 hours away. A man matching David's description had been seen buying food at a gas station, driving a white pickup truck. Police scrambled to trace the vehicle, setting up roadblocks along possible escape routes. Sara's phone buzzed. It was the FBI lead. "We've got him on camera, heading north." The chase was on again. But as the team prepared to move, Sara took one last look at the storage unit. The still air carried a faint metallic smell. She murmured softly, "Those poor kids. We'll make sure no one forgets them." The RV was only the beginning. The storage unit had revealed the full horror. And now the predator himself was on the run. Night fell over Georgia as flashing police lights carved through the highways. Every radio frequency echoed with one name, David Harper. A bolo had been issued across 3 states. His white pickup truck was last seen heading north on Interstate 75 near the Tennessee border. Detective Sara Daniels sat in the lead SUV, gripping her radio. The air inside was tense, her mind looping over everything they'd found. The tapes, the crib, the chair, bolted to the floor. This wasn't just a father who'd lost control. This was a man who had lived a double life, carefully hiding behind the mask of a parent. At the command center, FBI agent Marcus Lee coordinated the pursuit. His voice was calm but urgent. "He's been planning this for years. He has safe houses, aliases, maybe accomplices. We need to find out where he's heading before he disappears again." Through surveillance footage, analysts discovered David had visited several remote campgrounds in recent months. Each site corresponded to missing children cases dating back nearly 5 years. The RV had been a mobile prison, and the storage unit, a graveyard. At 3 a.m., a patrol officer in Chattanooga spotted the white pickup parked behind an abandoned diner. The moment the call came through, Sara's team raced to the location. The diner sat on a quiet road surrounded by thick trees. As the officers approached, the sound of cicadas filled the humid air. David was inside, sitting in a booth, calmly eating a sandwich. When he saw the flashing lights outside, he didn't run. Instead, he raised his hand slowly and smiled. "I was wondering when you'd catch up," he said, almost proudly. The officers ordered him out. He complied without resistance, his eyes vacant. As they cuffed him, Sara stepped forward.
"You killed your son, David. Why?"
He looked at her, lips curling into a faint smirk. "He was the only one who knew what I did." Her heart sank. She wanted to yell, but she stayed silent. They placed him in the back of the car and drove to the precinct, sirens wailing through the night. Back at headquarters, interrogation began. David sat motionless, staring at the table. He refused food, water, or legal counsel. When Agent Lee asked why he had the cameras, he leaned forward and said softly, "To remember them." The room went cold. For the next 6 hours, investigators pieced together fragments of his life. David had once worked as a traveling mechanic, moving from town to town, never staying long enough to raise suspicion. His RV wasn't a home, it was a cover. He used it to lure victims, promising shelter or safety, only to trap them inside his twisted world. In one horrifying revelation, digital forensics linked David to multiple online aliases tied to child exploitation forums. The FBI realized they weren't just dealing with a murderer, but a networked predator. Sara left the room, unable to stomach more. Outside, dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight hit the police cars lined up in front of the station. She leaned against her vehicle, breathing heavily, the weight of the case pressing down on her. The nightmare wasn't over. They had David in custody, but questions remained. How many victims? Were there accomplices? Were some still alive? The answers lay buried within his silence, and within the chilling footage found in his possession. Sara looked back through the interrogation glass one last time. David sat there, smiling faintly, as if satisfied that his story had finally been discovered. And for the first time in years, she felt true fear. Not for herself, but for what else they might find next. The interrogation had reached its dead end. David Harper wouldn't talk, but his laptop would. FBI cyber forensics had seized 2 computers, 4 encrypted hard drives, and several hidden USB sticks from the RV. Every drive was locked with multiple layers of encryption. It took the team nearly 48 hours to crack the first one. What they found inside silenced the entire lab. Thousands of videos, photos, journals, maps. Each folder was labeled by a date and a name. Every file led to a missing person case stretching over 8 years across 5 states. David hadn't just documented his crimes, he'd created a twisted archive of his own legacy. Agent Marcus Lee stood behind the forensic analyst as the footage played on the monitor. His jaw tightened.
"Turn it off," he said sharply.
The team obeyed. Detective Sara Daniels watched from across the room, horrified but focused. "We need every location tagged,
Every timestamp.
Someone out there is still missing." For the next several days, the task force pieced together David's digital trail. His email aliases led to underground chat rooms on the dark web, private networks used by other predators who shared content and tips for evading capture. But what made David different was his obsession with documentation. He wasn't just a participant. He was a collector, an archivist of pain. Then something unexpected appeared, a folder named Redeem. Inside were dozens of handwritten scans, pages from a notebook. Each page contained diary-like entries, confessions mixed with delusions. They said I was the only one brave enough to save them from their sins. My son saw too much. He betrayed me. There's another place deep in the woods. They're waiting. The final entry read, "If they find this, it means I failed." "But someone else will continue," Sara froze. "Someone else will continue?"
That one line sent shivers down her spine.
It hinted at a possible accomplice, or worse, a successor. The team began scanning through the recovered metadata. GPS logs placed David in a remote area of northern Alabama 2 weeks before his arrest. Satellite images showed an old barn surrounded by forest, private land, off-grid. Sara made the call. "We're going there." When the tactical team arrived, the sun was setting behind the pines. The barn's metal roof was rusted through, and inside, a generator hummed softly. They forced the door open. What they found inside was beyond comprehension. Dozens of personal items, children's backpacks, shoes, clothing, lined the walls. A makeshift bed sat in the corner, with chains still bolted to the floor. On a small table rested a laptop, still warm. The screen displayed a message. "Welcome back, David." Someone else had been there recently. Sara's blood ran cold. Whoever continued his mission had known they were coming. The team sealed the site, marking every item for evidence. Back at HQ, the news spread quickly. There might be a second suspect, someone who had worked alongside David or perhaps taken up his cause after his arrest. The horror wasn't over. It had just evolved, and somewhere out there, the next monster was already watching. The Alabama barn changed everything. For weeks, investigators had believed David Harper was a lone predator. But the discovery of the second laptop, logged in moments before the raid, shattered that assumption. At FBI headquarters, tension filled the operations room. Agent Marcus Lee replayed the security footage from the barn, zooming in on faint tire tracks outside the door. They were fresh. Whoever had been there had escaped just hours earlier. Sara Daniels stood silently, arms crossed. Her eyes were locked on the message recovered from the screen. "Welcome back, David." "He wasn't working alone," she said quietly. Someone knew his habits, his timing, his passwords. Digital forensics soon found a clue. The same encryption key used on David's hard drives was embedded in recent chatroom activity on the dark web. A new user had appeared, calling themselves The Shepherd. The tone of their messages matched David's writing style perfectly. Too perfectly, but there was one disturbing difference. The Shepherd was posting after David's arrest. Sara's instincts screamed that they were dealing with someone close, someone who had access to David's files, and maybe even his evidence in custody. Then something chilling happened. A new email arrived at Sara's official FBI inbox. The subject line read, "You found his barn, but can you find my—" Attached was a single image, a blurry photograph of a small rural church. Marcus looked over her shoulder, frowning. "This is a taunt. He's watching us." The team traced the image to a town 2 states away, rural Tennessee. They deployed immediately, bringing in tactical units and drones. When they reached the church, the doors were wide open. Inside, candles flickered across old pews, and a strange smell of burnt plastic filled the air. Then they saw it. Dozens of small monitors lined the altar, looping footage of David Harper's interrogations and police briefings. Someone had hacked into the Bureau's internal feed. Sara clenched her jaw. "He's inside our system." That night, Cyber Division confirmed the unthinkable. The intruder had breached secure FBI servers, downloading thousands of files related to the Harper case. Whoever the Shepherd was, he had deep access, possibly with inside help. The task force narrowed its focus inward. Every agent who had touched the Harper files was investigated. Keycards were checked, login timestamps compared, and that's when they found it, a pattern of unauthorized access from an internal user, matching the nights when the dark web posts appeared. The name attached to the account made Sara's blood run cold. Agent Cole Matthews. He had been working with them from day one. Cole had joined the task force as a cyber analyst, helping decrypt David's drives. He had full access to every piece of recovered data. And now he had disappeared. Marcus slammed his fist on the table.
He's the shepherd.
He's continuing it. The betrayal hit Sara harder than she expected. Cole had always seemed quiet, intelligent, even compassionate when discussing the victims. Now his compassion looked like camouflage. A nationwide manhunt was launched. Cole's last known location, the Tennessee state line. Surveillance drones picked up his car, abandoned near an old bridge facing the river. Inside the vehicle was a note. "David showed me the truth. Now I'll finish what he started." Sara read it in silence. This wasn't over. It had just become personal. The manhunt for Cole Matthews consumed the bureau. Every field office across 3 states had been alerted. His face flashed across internal bulletins marked "armed and extremely dangerous." But Sara Daniels wasn't satisfied waiting for reports. She wanted him herself. Cole had vanished after leaving his car by the river, but Sara didn't believe he'd drowned. He was too methodical, too proud. Every clue he left felt deliberate, like a trail he wanted her to follow. For days, the team dissected his digital footprint. Then a breakthrough. A security camera in northern Alabama captured a man matching Cole's build, buying supplies at a gas station. Propane tanks, batteries and canned food. Sara stared at the footage, her heart racing. He was alive and preparing for something. Marcus slammed a file onto her desk. "You've traced one of the USB drives he stole. It pinged near an old ranger station in the Smoky Mountains. That's where they'd go." The next morning, a tactical team moved in under thick fog. The forest was silent, too silent. Sara could feel the weight of the mountain pressing down as they advanced, weapons raised. They reached the ranger station just before dawn. The front door was unlocked. Inside, papers were scattered everywhere. Maps, notes, and printed screenshots of David Harper's files. On the wall, dozens of photos of Sara and her team were pinned in a disturbing collage. She froze. He had been watching them all along. In the center of the room was a small television, flickering with static. Suddenly a voice came through, distorted, calm, familiar. "You finally made it, Sara." She turned slowly toward the sound. "David showed me what the world hides. He collected the forgotten." "I'm just finishing his work." Marcus gestured for the team to trace the signal. But Sara shook her head. She wanted to hear.
"You think you're different from us," the voice continued.
"But you watched the tapes too. You looked into the abyss."
"Tell me it didn't change you." For a moment, Sara felt the cold truth of his words.
Every night since the RV case began, she'd dreamed of those victims. Their faces, their screams, but she wasn't like him. "You hide behind his sickness," she said into the static, "because it gives you purpose. But all you are, Cole, is a coward who needed a monster to worship." A faint chuckle echoed from the speakers. "You'll see soon enough." Then, silence. Outside, an agent shouted, "We've got movement!" A shadow darted between trees. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the woods. Sara sprinted toward the chaos, her boots crushing wet leaves. She saw him, Cole, running toward a clearing. He looked different now, gaunt, eyes wild, beard untrimmed, wearing a black jacket smeared with dirt. He turned, aiming a pistol. Sara dove behind a log as bullets tore through branches. Marcus flanked him from the side, shouting, "Cole, drop it!" But Cole wasn't there to surrender. He raised the gun toward his own head. Sara stepped forward.
"Don't do it!"
she yelled. He smiled faintly. "You'll never find the others." Then he did. A single shot. The forest fell silent again as the medics confirmed his death. Sara noticed something clenched in his fist. A small, blood-stained flash drive. When she plugged it in back at headquarters, one file stood out. Harper, final. The contents would change everything. Back at FBI headquarters, the building felt heavier than ever. The walls carried whispers of everything the task force had endured, from David Harper's RV to Cole Matthews' final stand in the Smoky Mountains. Now, only one unanswered question remained. What was on the flash drive Cole died protecting? Sara Daniels sat alone in the evidence room, the small, blood-stained USB drive resting in her gloved hand. The label read simply, Harper, Final. With a deep breath, she inserted it into the computer. The screen flickered, and then a single video file appeared. No encryption this time. Just a plain, chilling title, The Children of the Redeemer. Sara hesitated, then clicked play. The footage opened with shaky handheld video, a rural compound deep in the woods. Men in dark clothing moved through the trees, carrying boxes and children with blindfolds. Their faces were covered, but their voices were unmistakable. One of them was David Harper.
The other
Was Cole Matthews. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. They had known each other long before the RV, long before the FBI investigation. Then a third voice spoke, calm, commanding, and older. You were chosen to rebuild what society destroyed.
These are not victims.
They are offerings. Sara paused the video, zooming in on the man speaking. His face was partially obscured, but his badge, faintly visible, stopped her heart. It wasn't just any badge. It was a law enforcement emblem. The man was wearing an old county sheriff's uniform, from the very department that had first investigated Harper's missing wife years ago. Sara whispered to herself, "No way." The footage resumed. It showed Harper kneeling, trembling as the sheriff placed a hand on his shoulder.
You'll take the fall, David. You'll draw them away from us.
The shepherd will finish your work. It was all orchestrated. David hadn't been the mastermind. He was the pawn. The real monster had worn a badge. Sara immediately contacted Marcus. We've got a third man, the sheriff from the Harper case. He's been running this the entire time. Within hours, the team raided the former sheriff's property, now abandoned. Inside, they found more evidence than they could process. Surveillance photos of FBI agents, old files on missing children, and bank records tied to a secret network called Project Redeemer. The case exploded across national headlines. Corrupt sheriff behind decade-long predatory network, read one. But for Sara, victory didn't feel like triumph. Late that night, she stood in the evidence room again, staring at the monitor replaying Harper's last recorded words from a confession found earlier in his journals.
I thought I was saving them.
But I was just another lost soul following a darker shepherd. Sara turned off the screen. The case was over. But the scars it left on her, on the victims, on everyone who had looked into that darkness, would never fully fade. Before leaving, she placed the flash drive into an evidence box marked "Closed Cases, Do Not Open." As she turned to leave, the monitor behind her suddenly flickered back to life for just 1 second. A line of text appeared on the screen, glowing in red. You can't stop redemption. The case of David Harper and the shepherd shook the nation. But for the agents who lived it, the scars remain. They stopped one man, uncovered a second, and exposed a system built on silence. But evil doesn't die in headlines. It adapts. It waits. Agent Sara Daniels never spoke publicly about what she saw on that final flash drive. The Bureau sealed the case, calling it classified. But rumors spread, whispers of a third name, a new leader rising in the shadows. Maybe it was just paranoia.
Maybe it was something worse. What's certain is this: every monster leaves a trail.
And somewhere, right now, another RV sits alone in the dark, waiting to be found, because in the world of true crime, endings are rarely final. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Subscribe for more real-life mysteries, psychological crime stories, and investigations that expose the truth, no matter how terrifying it gets. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious.
And never look away too soon. Then it went dark again. Sara froze.
The air felt cold. Somewhere, in the depths of the web, the story wasn't over. It had only just begun.